Hey guys, Tarke here, and I have updated everything. This is going to be the be-all guide for my Soulrend character, and also it's coming, the Celestial Cat MTX, through all things Tarke is possible. That sentence made sense, so it's going to be coming soon. So if you haven't played Soulrend yet, you've got a reason for it to be on your future. I'm currently level 93 on my Soulrend character, and I'm chasing down gear. Since the previous video, I managed to get a 6-link perfect form, which I'm very, very happy with. And we're going to be gearing towards Uber Elder. Uber Elder is definitely viable with this build. I did Uber Elder last league on a Corsair character. It's a very similar playstyle. But I'm now going to be talking about all the different things that you can do with this build, because people keep asking me, Tarke, one hand and shield versus dual wield versus staff plus bow and quiver. I'm going to cover everything through Path of Building. I've also done crafting options for all of your chase gear. If you have any questions, they have been covered either in Path of Building, in the video you're about to watch, or in my previous 4 build updates, which I'm going to link in a playlist. Any questions have 100% been covered. The only question which hasn't been covered is CI and low life variants, which I'll do later in the league. So, let's talk about weapons. This is my current weapon. The non-ailment chaos damage over time multiplier just drops. You don't need to unveil it, although you can also craft it through unveiling. And it is the most important stat by far on weapons. It is a more multiplier. The maximum roll goes up to 38%. If you compare that to a support gem, that's as much as a void manipulation. So getting this mod on a weapon is the equivalent of gaining another link. So that's why it's so important, and it's why anyone who's telling you to use unique weapons and unique shields and stuff which doesn't have this mod, in my opinion, it's wrong unless they have so much damage already that they can get away with just going for certain defense setups. Now, obviously, if you're power clearing low-tier maps, it doesn't matter. I've done Shaper on a 5-link with GMP and Link, so only a 4-link. You don't need insane damage, but if you're struggling with damage, definitely go for a one like this. They are really cheap. You can get these for a couple of Chaos on PoB Trade if you look at this. If you use fossils, you can craft Cursed Enemies with Double Tender Spear on hit if you want to get that next level min-max. But Tarke, what about Breath of the Council? What about Cane of Unravelling? Well, that's where Path of Building math comes in handy. So this is my current setup. This is also the tree that I recommend that everyone follows. And with my current setup in a 6-link, with all the appropriate things tagged, Shaper Guardian, with my cursors up, with the Wither up, so on and so forth, we have 400k dot damage with my current setup. So let's compare that to Breath of the Council. Breath of the Council costs about an Exalt or so in the Trade League, so let's compare it to like a 3C wand. So if you were to dual wield Breath of the Councils, my current setup, you would have 300k damage. Breath of the Council is trash because it doesn't have the more multiplier on there. It only has increased chaos damage. The area is kind of nice, but it only really equates to +1 radius, so it's pretty whatever. And the skill effect duration is great, but you can craft skill effect duration, so it's not even that great. So let's compare the damage of 2 Breath of the Councils to 1 of my wands. One of my wands with a shield or with nothing else equipped is more damage than 2 Breath of the Councils. Breath of the Council is bad. The only good thing about Breath of the Council is you get to use Shield Charge for Fortify. However, Shield Charge is very weak this league because of the way the K works. You're using Flame Dash for everything. So don't use Breath of the Council. If you want to use a Shield Charge setup, craft yourself a rare sword with the dodge implicit, and just like do a multi-modded dodge sword. And that way you can still use Shield Charge if you want to Fortify, but don't use Breath of the Council. You're paying way too much for a really bad item. So what about Cane of Unravelling? So I said in the last video that I think Cane of Unravelling is, again, a noob trap, but we'll talk about Cane of Unravelling. So Cane of Unravelling gives +2 to level socketed Chaos Gems, 30% increased Chaos damage, and up to 55% non-ailment multiplier, which sounds really good. Now, there is diminishing returns on this non-ailment Chaos damage over time multiplier, so the more you have of it, the less effective it is. but it's still so much more powerful than anything else that you just want to stack the hell out of it. So let's compare that to my current setup. So with Soulrend socketed in the weapon, 6 linked, you get 440k dot damage. And that's higher than my 2 current wands. So obviously that's the right thing to do, right? Well, it's only slightly better than my current wands, and Cane of Unravelling isn't even the optimal endgame setup. Also, the dual wield clusters are much more efficient than the staff clusters for this build in particular, so you'd be missing out on a bunch of cast speed, which is what makes the build feel really smooth. Cast speed is very, very important. So it's not even really a budget option, because then you need to invest into 6-linking a staff. It's much better that you invest your 6-link currency into a chest piece that you'll never replace, than into a staff which isn't even that good and can be easily beaten. So let's give you an example of like a realistic self-crafted wand made entirely through alt regaling and then crafted mods. So this right here is a alt crafted wand, and let's do none, just example alt crafted wand, and I've just noticed there's something slightly wrong with it in here, so let's just clean it up a bit. So this is 100% fair. It seems to have added an extra bit of skill effect duration for some reason, so let's just remove that. There you go. Okay, so that's realistic. So an alt crafted wand, 2 of them, is 520k, which is way better than Cane of Unravelling, and the amount of currency that you would have spent crafting a Cane of Unravelling, getting the 6th link and having divined perfect rolls, it'd be far cheaper to do this. So the way that you would do it is you would spam use alterations or spam use chaos fossils to try and increase the likelihood of getting the chaos roll, and you're looking for chaos damage overtime multiplier and spell damage, and then you want to craft chaos damage. Chaos skills have 12% increased skill effect duration. It has 3 tiers of it. I currently only have tier 2, and that just comes from fighting Syndicate and naturally unveiling items. Right. So that's that. Now, an example of like the ultimate multi-mod. Now, people won't be multi-modding gear for a while yet, but when you get to that point of multi-modding gear, you're going to want something which looks something kind of like this. This will look like a DPS downgrade, but it's actually a massive upgrade for a few reasons. So you would alt spam until you got non-ailment chaos damage over time multiplier. You would then regal and try and annul off the regal, and you would keep doing this until you had only that non-ailment multiplier there. You would then craft multi-mod, and then you can craft 2 more suffixes and 2 more prefixes. The 2 suffixes you would craft would be 10% chance to gain Arcane Surge when you kill an enemy. The one weakness about this build is it's an Eldritch Battery build, which is a very good thing, but it means we can't use the Arcane Surge support gem. So we have to generate our Arcane Surge through other means. I would get it on a wand. You would craft trigger a socketed spell when you use a skill as your other suffix. This lets you automate a 3-link Essence Drain if you want to for extra damage or utility setups. And then you would craft spell damage and chaos damage with increased skill effect duration. This would be very expensive to do so. This is like your end game setup, but again, if you want the cheap option, you can just buy something kind of like I have for 3 chaos, and that is far better than any unique you will get, realistically. So let's do that. Now, what about bows, though? So the reason why I would recommend a well-crafted rare bow rather than a well-crafted staff in the setup, if you were going for mana and not reserving all your mana doing Eldritch Battery memes, then a very well-crafted 7-link bow with the Arcane Surge support gem would be very strong, but we're not doing that build. So this is what I'd recommend if you want to go for the 2-hand setup. This is also what I'd recommend for hardcore. The reason why I recommend this for hardcore is that then lets you use a quiver. An example of that would be something like this. With Shuddering Fossils, you can actually craft 5% chance to gain a Frenzy Charge when you hit a rare or unique enemy. But you want +1 level of socketed gems. You alt spam until you hit +1 level of socketed gems. You then regal and try and annul off the regal, and you keep doing this until you have only +1 level of socketed gems there. You then craft multiple modifiers, +2 level of socketed support gems. You then use Empower in this setup. Crafted non-ailment chaos damage every time multiplier, and then chances to trigger Arcane Surge when you kill an enemy, trigger a socketed spell when you use a skill. The other good thing about this is you could then run a 6-link Essence Drain in your bow, which would be completely automated by your Soulrend, which would make your bossing a really easy quality of life, because you're just automatically sending out the Essence Drain when you need to. But yes, to squash the weapon debate, if you want a defensive setup, go for a bow and a quiver instead of a one-hand and a shield, because, as I said, shield charge is very weak this league. If you want to use a one-hand and a shield, then use a crafted sword. Breath of the Council is trash. Cane of Unravelling is trash. Go for cheapso ones. Look on PoB Trade. Do that. You can do all of the content with the cheapo ones. If you want to min-max, go for these multi-modded crafted stuff. So, let's talk about the body armors, which is another reason why I say, since we're using these unique chests, it's much better to just 6-link the unique chests. I started off using Queen of the Forest. I am now settled on Perfect Form. Perfect Form and Kintsugi, it comes down to personal preference. They are both two very strong defensive chests. If you want to go pure clear speed, pure zoom, use Queen of the Forest. I like Perfect Form. So why do I like Perfect Form? So Perfect Form gives you 100% reduced mana reservation of Arctic Armor. Arctic Armor is very powerful. The reason why Arctic Armor is very powerful is it gives you less physical and fire damage taken when hit. You spam Soulrend a lot while bossing, and the times you get hit is when you're stood still casting. So this makes you a lot tankier, and it doesn't cost you anything, so it's fine. So it's fine. The only slight drawback is it does cost you a gem setup. Perfect Form also gives you phase acro for free, so you get a lot of dodge. My current setup has chance to dodge spells, 64% spell dodge without any Flasks, without any Vile Grace. You can actually cap your spell dodge without having to use any temporary buffs, just because of how strong the new Trickster is with something like the Perfect Form. So you're like, okay, Tarke, that sounds amazing. Well, how can Kintsugi ever compete with that? Kintsugi is a very strong chess piece. If you don't know what it does, I'm trying to track one here. It has life, resists, and then 20% less damage taken if you've not been hit recently. This stacks very well with other modifiers that Trickster has. Trickster has up to 9% damage reduction per Ghost Shroud. So there is diminishing returns on this, but that's 29% global generic damage reduction if you haven't been hit. Because we have so much spell dodge and we have so much evasion, you get hit very infrequently. So basically you have this constant massive buffer, and when it comes to bossing, some of the scariest things in Shaper and Uber Elder are the degens. Stuff on the floor, random Shaper beams, and all of that stuff. Also the Elder sucky suck he does when he freezes you in place. With Prolonged Pain, you get an additional 10% reduced damage taken over time. So when you combine all of those together, you then have 39%. There's diminishing returns. And you can also combo with this 5% here. So basically, you'll never die to any of the scary boss degens, and a lot of the scary bosses that you want to run right now have a bunch of degens. So there's really good synergy there. So if you know that you're farming a lot of stuff like Uber Elder and a lot of Shaper, and you know that you're bad with those beam mechanics, then maybe a Kintsugi might be better than a Perfect Form. Kintsugi, since it also just gives you generic reduction to everything, whereas Perfect Form is tailored more towards physical fire damage and spell damage, it's better in niche cases. So if you never want to think, never want to change out anything, go for Kintsugi. Otherwise, Perfect Form is amazing. So that's that. So let's talk about Helm Enchants, because Helm Enchants is another question I got a lot. Should you go for the +1 proj or the 40% hinder on hit? Hinder applies a powerful slow, if you're not aware. I personally would go for the hinder on hit. +1 proj would also be fine. I'm using GMP and a Dying Sun. You could potentially use Dying Sun, +1 proj Helm Enchant, and drop GMP and links, but I really don't think that you need to. But that is an option if you would like to. Pantheon. I got asked this question a lot. You guys really care about Pantheon. So I've separated this into a bossing setup and a mapping setup. If you're lazy and you don't want to swap, use the bossing setup all of the time. Soul of Arakali, as I mentioned, when fully upgraded, it gives you reduced damage taken from overtime effects, which are quite scary. Chance to avoid lightning damage on hit. This is basically like an extra 10% dodge / spell dodge for all global lightning damage. Very powerful. 50% increased recovery rate of life and energy shield if you've stopped taking damage over time recently. This is the thing which really makes this node broken when you combine it with all the tricks and stuff when it comes to degens on stuff like Elder and Shaper. So, if you walk through Shaper Beam, that's a degen. So when you walk out of it, you get 50% increased recovery of all of the regen that Trickster has. My passive skill tree has something like 6% life regen just natively in the tree. Then Trickster gets another 70% increased if they've killed an ad recently. The Elder fight has lots of random ads that you're killing, also while mapping, and this all scales incredibly well with the catalyzed Eternal Flask, which you can't see because of my sub counter. So catalyzed Eternal Life Flask of Staunching has 2.5k life recovered over 2.7 seconds. That doesn't seem that great, but when you're mapping and you times that by 70%, and then any increased like life flask recovery you can get on belts and other sources, this becomes like crazy instant full healing. I would recommend this for all the tricksters out there. It's really, really good. Reduced effect of shock, reduced shock duration is just nice. Reduced chaos res against damage of time is just kind of nice fluff. The other bossing one is Soul of Raslava. This is also another way to boost trickster sustain for bossing. Because people ask, how do you sustain on bosses? Life Flask gain 3 charges every 3 seconds if you haven't used a Life Flask recently. When bossing, you very rarely ever use your Life Flask because you just never get hit because you have the spell dodge and then you try and dodge the attacks. That tends to help. So you'll always have your Life Flask available when you need it. And when upgraded, you get 60% increased life recovery when on low life. And this scales with all this other increased life recovery. So this is just like instant full heal. Like, doesn't matter if you've got 8k life, you just, boom, instant, easy as. When it comes to mapping, you want to go for the Zoom Speedy map setup. I would recommend Soul of Lunaris, fully upgraded. And that gives you increased movement speed and physical damage reduction for nearby enemies. Chance to avoid projectiles. A lot of the Syndicate stuff, which people really struggle with while mapping, a lot of it is projectile based. It also gives you a bit more dodge and spell dodge, which scales very well. And it also gives you avoid projectiles that have chained, which is good for you guys who run golems. I don't like running golems because they get you killed, but if you want to run a golem, definitely run to Soul of Lunaris. And then use Soul of Gurakan while mapping for additional chance to evade, but more importantly, that 6% increase in movement speed if you haven't been hit recently, and you're very rarely hit because you have all this dodge and all this other stuff. Getting back into the Path of Building chase item guide, highly recommend the Gull as your go-to helmet. They're like a couple of chaos in trade leagues. There aren't any in my private leagues. This is what I would use, especially with the Solstice Vigil, but that's all stuff I covered in yesterday's video, so if you want to know more about that, watch yesterday's video. I'm going to give you some examples of like the other chase gear you could go for. So, on Elder Rings, you can get some really good mods. So, Elder Rings can give you 5% chance to evade attacks. If you have 2 of these, with your Flasks up and with a Grace Watcher's Eye, you can hit the evasion cap. So you can be evasion capped on this build and then also be spell dodge capped on this build without having to use any memes. That's ridiculously powerful. Also, just one thing to note, if spell dodge seems off in the Path of Building, the reason being is Path of Building doesn't count Escape Artist correctly because we don't have a way to tell it that we have Ghost Shrouds yet. It's just something to look out for. When you go to crafting your perfect like Elder Unset Ring, I would recommend using one of the following methods. Most of these items, I tell you, like, pick one of these mods. So, you'll never have this item, but try and get something like this. This is like your end of league goal, basically. A +3 level Socted Gems Unset Ring. We use Vol Grace in this build. The extra levels on the Grace gives you a bunch more evasion. Helps you get that evasion cap. Life Energy Shield, since this is an Eldritch Battery Might of a Meta build, it uses life. Use either Shuddering Fossils Pristine Fossils, or Essence of Envies to try and roll it. So, Shuddering Fossils give you cannot be shocked or ignited while moving. I really like this mod. It's probably the most powerful here in my opinion. Very hard to hit something like this, but something to consider. Pristine Fossils give you up to 30% increased life recovery from Flasks. As I mentioned, you can make Trickster life flask recovery really insane. You can get 34% increased chaos damage from Deafening Essences of Envy if you just want more damage. And you can also craft +1 to minimum endurance or frenzy charges from Syndicate crafting. So those are all things to consider. Now, ideally, you'd have 2 rings with a mix of those stats. You only need the +3 level of gems on the Grace. You don't need it on the Malevolence. And that's the main thing there. When it comes to getting like the perfect belt is more realistic to hit, but still pretty difficult to hit. So ideally, you would have like tier 2, tier 3, or higher life and flat energy shield. There's a very strong Syndicate crafted mod, which is flat evasion and energy shield. I don't have it fully upgraded yet, but even at tier 1, it's very, very strong. So up to 150 flat evasion and 15 flat energy shield. You can stack this with the flat energy shield mod. Again, getting evasion cap is very good. Very, very strong. And then you want to get stuff like reduced flask charges used, increased flask charge duration, increased flask charges gained. The flask mods are very, very powerful on belts, and people don't value them enough. Example of like the perfect 3-stat jewel. You'll probably never have this stuff, but things to look out for. Increased life. Have increased life on all of your jewels. Very, very important. Some kind of increased damage. You can use minion damage because of spiritual aid means minion damage affects you. You can use increased damage, spell damage while dual wielding, spell damage while using a shield if you use a shield, spell damage with 2-handed weapons if using 2-handed weapons. You get the idea. And then you can get up to 4% non-ailment chaos damage over time multiplier. It's very unlikely that you'll get perfect 4-stat jewels. Other like decent stats to look out for from that 4th one would be like increased attributes, increased resists, increased cast speed, etc. When it comes to chasing Watcher's Eyes, I even broke down all the different slots you could go for, and I like rated them in a tier list. So there's no excuse to be like, I don't know what to go for this build. So the tier 1, like the best mods you can get on a Watcher's Eye, you can get up to 22% non-ailment chaos damage over time multiplier. I hate how long that mod is to say, while affected by Malevolence. You can get up to 8% chance of evade attacks while affected by Grace. Those two are the most powerful in my opinion. Those are the 2 you really want to chase after. But other good ones to look out for, so tier 2. You can get up to 15% increased movement speed while affected by Grace. Really good. People will value that either as amazing or terrible. Some weird people don't like having too much movement speed. I don't understand you people. You can also get up to 30% increased skill effect duration while affected by Malevolence. Very strong. Really good for Soulrend and just quality of life on Vile skills, Blight, Hinders, all of that stuff. You can get up to 20% increased recovery rate of life and energy shield while affected by Malevolence. Really broken mod. This will scale all your passive life regen, all your passive energy shield regen. It will affect stuff like Flask. It would affect stuff like Leech for any Slayers out there. It would affect stuff like that. You can get up to 10% chance to dodge attack hits while affected by Grace. And that's obviously really good. Tier 3 mods would be just any other Malevolence or Grace mod, since anything is decent. And another thing that you could do if you wanted to, if you want to take the build to the next level, is see if you can find a up to 10% damage taken from mana before life while affected by Clarity mod. You could then roll like 1 piece of reduced mana reservation somewhere in your build and run a level 1 Clarity to make your Eldritch Battery even more efficient. To do that though, you need to make sure that you have a very good amount of energy shield. So in here is examples of everything you might ever possibly want to craft, all the current gear options my character currently uses. You can see my current gear, and all the other things. Now, one other thing that is worth chasing, but is going to be really difficult to get, would be an Essence of Delirium crafted Elder Gloves. So, on both Elder Gloves and Amulets, you can get up to 16% more non-ailment chaos damage over time multiplier. Essence of Delirium gives socketed gems deal 30% more damage over time. So, in there you could put your Essence Drain, or your Blight Totems if you're running 2 6-links. And this is basically another skill gem for your either utility Essence Drain or Blight. Since people ask why I use Essence Drain over Bane, since I have Blasphemy Temp Chains and a Curse on Hit wand applying my curses, I don't need Bane to apply my curses. Essence Drain does more base damage than Bane does. Essence Drain also gives me a heal, and it has a longer base direction, so duration, so it's really strong. Again, ideally you want stuff like Life, stuff like Energy Shield. If the resists anything seem weird in here, it's because I've swapped in loads of random uniques. Obviously, you want to cap your resistances. Capping resistances is important. Any missing attributes, fill it in. And then the only other last thing to talk about, really, is just Flasks. So, what flask you want to go for? If you have no special currency or whatever, you want to go for I like Chemist Quicksilvers. You can use Alchemist Quicksilvers of Adrenaline. Most important mod. Quicksilver, something of Adrenaline to go faster. A Chemist's or Perpetual or whatever, Stibnite Flask of Heat or Warding. Basically, get rid of freezes, get rid of chills. Feels good, man. Very important, the most important one, Jade Flask of Reflexes. So if we go back in game for a second, if we look at my current evasion, I've got 18k without anything up. With my not even perfectly rolled Jade Flask and a Stibnite, I got up to 52k. Yeah, it's really good. It gives a lot of evasion. A lot of evasion. Since we have all the spell dodge, that's how we avoid the spells. All of our evasion is how we avoid all the attacks. You could also theoretically not get hit. That's something that you can do, but I realize that's pretty difficult sometimes. So yeah, this flask alone gives something like 20k evasion, and then it scales up really well. Get that juicy Jade Flask if you can. Now, if you can't afford the Dying Sun, you're going to want to use a Quartz Flask. A Quartz Flask will actually give you that spell dodge cap that I talked about earlier. It will also give you some attack dodge. If you have the Dying Sun, run the Dying Sun. To get around the whole fact that you're losing a mod somewhere here, you're going to have to craft Freeze Immune somewhere on gear. You can get it through Syndicate. I think you can also get it from some of the new Synthesis stuff. We don't know exactly how that works. Or you're going to have to drop the Jade Flask of Reflexes. Dying Sun is obviously amazing for map clear, but not a tool needed for bossing. But yes, that is everything covered. Everything you need is in this perfect path of building. This is the skill tree. If you need any help with leveling, you want to see how this progressed or anything, go back and watch the previous videos. Everything is there. Everything is there. And finally, and I've said this so many times this week, Spiritual Aid makes the minion damage nodes apply to you. I can still guarantee the most asked question of this video is, why do I take the minion nodes? Anyway, I've rambled enough. I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Bye-bye.